because you fucked up. You really did. I'm about to see you.
When you're in the restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, and you got a guy assaulting your cameraman.
Thank you. We're trying to get unlocked.
There's no one there to save you, and you're going after the most powerful people in the world. In the world.
You know how the virus keeps mutating?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're exploring is like, why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we could create undoubtedly develop new vaccines, right?
This is Pfizer's Jordan Tristan Walker talking about the vaccine, about how they're mutating the virus. You know, caught on tape, self-evident, incontrovertible. You can't deny it. It's there for you. And then we confronted him.
You work for Pfizer. My question for you is, why does Pfizer want to hide from the public the fact that they're mutating the COVID viruses?
I had the videos on the iPad, and he grabbed the iPad out of my hands and started smashing it. I was worried that they were going to destroy the SD chip capturing all of this. So I was thinking, I got to get out of here with that SD chip intact.
That's intense. And I don't think people realize the downside of a situation like that.
We got out of that restaurant and there's nobody. It's like a scene out of American Psycho. Just empty, dark alleyways. And I'm trying to find a car. Jordan Walker's blocking the car. Guys stood in front of the SUV so they couldn't move. We're running for 15 minutes with a big gimbal camera, my undercover journalist. I mean, these are terrifying things.
I know one of your favorite quotes is, "The line between good and evil runs not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart."
As long as they don't defeat your spirit in each and every one of us, they can literally get everyone around me. They can incarcerate me, they can martyr me. But as long as they don't take over my heart, as long as they don't infiltrate that part of me, then they can't win.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is James O'Keefe, the journalist, whistleblower, and entrepreneur. You are the CEO of the O'Keefe Media Group, which you founded after leaving your position as CEO of Project Veritas after your investigation into pharma giant Pfizer that was watched 45 million times in 1 week. A number of your most high-profile investigations have led directly to new legislation, federal and state investigations, and congressional inquiries. Your mission is to decentralize journalism by empowering citizens to replicate the O'Keefe model of exposing corruption and fraud by bringing truth to the people. You believe that the mainstream media, in its current form, operates as a mouthpiece for agencies and politicians to impose their narrative. James, welcome to London Real.
Great to be with you.
Hey, it's great to have you here. So much to talk about. I'm drawn to a quote that came from you where you say, "It's very rare for a man to be humbled but not ruined." That's a beautiful statement. I feel like I've been there before. And how about you? Because you have really brought OMG up very quickly after leaving Veritas. How are you feeling these days?
Oh, it's a mix of emotions, but I'm an optimist. And I think that quote, humbled but ruined. Yeah, I was deeply and profoundly humbled, being ousted by the company I founded. And spent so many years building. I feel good. I mean, I'm tired. I'm sleep deprived. I'm running a startup company, and I'm the CEO of that company with about 15 employees, and doing all the things I have to do. And I'm happy to be with you. We were going to be on 2 hours. We only do 1 hour. So just tired and run at 100 miles an hour, basically.
I saw your conversation with Ben Shapiro, and he was like, "It's hard for me to associate Veritas without James." But then again, things move on. And so you've gone right back into startup mode. Does this remind you a little bit about the early days of Veritas? Or is it different because You're older, you're wiser, you know how to get things up and running quicker.
Good question. It's like, what's that Greek myth of the guy that rolls the boulder up the hill? I forgot the name of Sisyphus. It's Sisyphean. It's Sisyphean. The beginning of Veritas, I was in a garage apartment, halfway house on federal probation in 2010. So people knew of me, but they thought I was a one-hit wonder. It was much more difficult back then because I didn't have all the support and all of the relationships I had built over 14 years. So in many ways, it's easier. In some ways, it's more difficult because it's more Sisyphean. It's like, really? The boulders come all the way down. I have to push it back up again? So the way to keep going is to focus on the artistic aspects, the storytelling aspects, the things that drive me, like that urge to get the next story out. I can't even say what our next story is, but man, if you knew, it's so exciting, that part of it. And you'll sort of do whatever you have to do, build whatever you have to build in order to achieve the objective of telling that story.
Yeah. You know, James, I've had a lot of high power CEOs that have been on the show, and a lot of them have a similar story. And some of them even say that the guy that starts the organization, almost always gets thrown out of the organization in the end. And it's just kind of either a path or different personalities. I mean, have you had some time to kind of think about that? Did you go through various stages when it all happened? Or how do you put this in perspective now? I guess it's only been about 4 or 5 months.
This is like a 3-hour-long conversation answering that question. I mean, we're talking about Dr. Malone, who I had dinner with in Orange County 2 weeks ago at Mastro's, and he wrote this unbelievable essay, which I've quoted 3 times. It's called The Institutional Pathology That Took Down James O'Keefe. And I'm just going to quote briefly from it because it's fascinating. This is crazy. One would guarantee him a position of a fundraising opportunity and people want to support. How could he be thrown out at that moment in time? And it's sort of like this institutional pathology Malone describes. I'm quoting him. He said, this has all of the earmarks of a terrible institutional problem we've seen with boards. By the way, I'm not the only one. I can't believe how many people have messaged me from hospitals, churches, you know, the parable of Steve Jobs and all these sorts of things. The board develops a backwards looking focus, taking apart the success, wondering why we're taking these risks in the first place. They bring in the Goldman Sachs guy, like all that sort of business. And then people start conspiring to replace. One of my closest advisors told me when this happened, he said, I could see that a lot of people were working to become you. They wanted to be you. And of course, that's not possible. So, you learn from it. And as I've said, you learn from, makes you wiser. It's making me a little more disillusioned, which is not a bad thing because I'm a reporter. So the more real I can see the world, the better job I'm going to do at describing the world. So I think I'm going to be a more effective messenger, a better leader. And what doesn't kill you indeed makes you stronger.
Amen to Nietzsche on that one. And do you ever draw parallels to Steve Jobs? Did you think back that? Because they threw him out and then later they brought him back. And when they brought him back, it was amazing just to see what he could do, but they did throw him out, right?
Yeah, and I can't, without getting into specifics or breaking confidence, I work with a number of business leaders that came to me and experienced something I went through, and the advice they gave me was, you're a boxing guy on the floor of the boxing ring, and you're at a 9 count, and you're bloodied. The psychological effects of going through this is I can't even put it into words unless you go through it. And they all these people said the same thing, which is you got to get back up right away, even though you don't want to, even though psychologically, physically, spiritually, you are on the floor, bloodied, unconscious. You got to get back up. So what I did is I basically took out a whiteboard and late night with a bunch of blood brothers, I said, where are we going? And the epiphany that we came to was the sort of decentralizing of journalism, which is that now we have all these thousands of people that are messaging me every day, like, oh, I want to do what you do. And we're sort of leaving those people, how do we empower them? How do we mobilize them? And we came up with this idea of putting it back on them. We can talk about this with OMG's mission. So it was tough because I was on the floor of the boxing ring, bloodied, hurt, but eventually reached a point of forgiveness and what's next, like forward looking.
And in some way, this concept of decentralized journalism, which we'll get to, like you'll be able to realize that much quicker than you could have at Veritas, if you ever could have, right? Because now you're lean, you're mean, you can see a vision.
Yeah, and to your point about Steve Jobs, who once famously said that, I entered one of the most creative moments of my life. I was no longer encumbered by those weights that you're carrying on your back. So you felt pain, but you also felt kind of like you're a man walking on the moon. When you go through this, the first thing you feel, other than excruciating pain, is a lightness. I don't have to make payroll this month. Like it's just like this wild, the amount of responsibility, all those lawsuits, those are no longer my problems. I feel horrible that those problems exist and they're probably not going to be served. But that's the first thing you feel. And then you feel this sort of lightness on your feet, this agility. And then you're able to direct yourself to whatever your purpose is.
And some of the lessons you learned are no boards going forward, and you're going to own it.
Yeah, I never really paid attention to I read some people wrong, and that's my fault. I tend to probably think that everyone's out to help me or help the mission of what I'm doing, when we all know wisdom teaches us that obviously not everyone's out to help you. But that's my fault. I learned a lesson there, and I 100% own OMG right now.
I want to get into O'Keefe and what you're doing now, and you've already been working on some cool stories. But just to quickly put the Pfizer thing to bed, that was a massive deal. That rocketed around the world, and I think mainstream media didn't touch it. I think when Malone was here in January, he was like, Brian, they went back, they changed this guy's LinkedIn profile, they erased stuff from the Wayback Machine. Right. I was like, what? They can do that? And he gave me a lot of PsyOps insights of what happened off the back of you breaking that story. And I was just wondering, talk to me about some of the big things that happened with that, things you learned, things that maybe weren't even reported in the media.
Yeah, that was an amazing story, because we broke the story. And then when you Googled, Jordan Tristan Walker was his name. He was like high up at Pfizer, graduated from Yale Medical School, did Boston consulting. He was a legit guy. But the first thing that happened when I've been doing this for 15 years, what always happens is you break the story and the media is like, well, we cannot confirm. We cannot figure this out. It's like, well, isn't your job to do the investigative journalism thingy and corroborate this? Like, you want me to corroborate everything? Okay, I will, but they're doing the inverse of that, and they're actually saying there's no evidence to suggest he works at Pfizer. Journalists were actually suggesting there's no evidence because they were not looking for the evidence. They were behaving like ostrich, putting their head in the sand. So we just put it out knowing that he works for Pfizer because we have people on the inside. And the journalists were saying, well, we don't know that he works for Pfizer. And they were scrubbing his identity from the internet. But something remarkable happened. When we put this out on Twitter, and the journalists were saying this, it further created righteous indignation amongst the citizenry who were upset at what I just said they were doing. And that prompted citizens to go out and do the digging themselves. People that went to Yale with Jordan Tristan Walker were posting pictures of Jordan Tristan Walker in a lab coat next to them.
Wow.
So random people in the thread under my tweet. You had people that found his Boston Consulting Group papers identifying that he was indeed who he said he was. And in fact, he was a pretty established guy. And most importantly, another insider within Pfizer, Debbie Bernal was her name. At the time, she wished to remain anonymous. Debbie Bernal posted internal Teams documents, Microsoft messages, showing the staff chart inside of Pfizer. Debbie Bernal was inspired to go public after my ousting, days after the story. So what I saw transpire was something I've never seen. It was an organic, citizen-driven reporting infrastructure that was corroborating and identifying information that was perhaps incomplete. We didn't have those Microsoft documents until Debbie Bernal came forward. So that led me to go, whoa, what if I just posed questions on Twitter? What if I didn't have all the answers? And you have this invisible army, this populist journalism citizen army. That was really eye-opening for me.
Wow, that's beautiful. And that is the future, you think, of this decentralized investigative journalism?
Yeah, because particularly with undercover work or any type of investigative journalism is you have to be close to the scene of the crime. You have to have access. And, I don't have access to these institutions only by virtue of the fact that I have a reputation to be trusted. But you have to find people who are on the inside, and you have to get those people to trust you. And the bread and butter of investigative reporting is trust, protecting your sources, telling this story truthfully. So the future is no institutions with boards like Vanguard and BlackRock and this and that. You have to be so independent that you operate impartially and without fear. So when I saw that happen, when I saw people in the tweet threads, here's me next to Jordan at Yale, I thought, I never could have gotten that unless it was a decentralized effort. So and there's no one else really truthfully doing this. I mean, people are doing commentary. People are reading teleprompters. People are recycling stuff, but there's not really anyone doing this sort of work out there.
For people that don't know the details, like, what did you do with that Pfizer investigation? And again, this kind of has your signature all over it. I mean, it's a bold, strong move, right? That takes, some, what do you call it? Testicular fortitude, right?
Yes, testicular fortitude.
Talk about what you did and what you need, maybe the ethos you need to have in your organization to do what you did, because some people criticize that, but also you made things happen. You showed things to the world because of what you did. Can you just speak on it?
Well, Jordan, Walker was a Pfizer executive and a brave young man came to me some time ago, a year or two ago, and wanted to do something. And that person now works for me, by the way, at OMG. He's the one who recorded Walker. Brave, very proud of him and how far he's come. Doing this sort of work is not easy. It takes a lot of different skill sets. So think of like a Venn diagram, overlapping skill sets. You have to understand the law. You have to understand technology. That is how to operate the equipment. You have to be a good improvisational actor. You're questioning people live. You only have one take. It's on camera. You have to be ethical. One of the things they say about us is that I'm not ethical, but that they accuse me of what they're guilty of. They accuse me of doctoring tapes. We don't doctor anything. And you have to have all these skill sets in one person. So the guy that recorded this, very brave person, met with him and built a rapport with him and got him to open up about the vaccine, about how they're mutating the virus. This is Pfizer's Jordan Tristan Walker talking. This is something that Pfizer initially denied, but then Pfizer put out a statement, Faucian in its non-denial denial. Like, we don't mutate, but we do mutate. This is what Pfizer actually said. It's remarkable that Pfizer actually issued a statement. Usually they don't. And they also said that this is Walker talking about the virus originated in the Wuhan lab, which is something that Pfizer would never say publicly. And they also was so narcissistic and, this is bad for America, but good for us. It was like a Saturday Night Live sketch of a stereotypical Pfizer executive if you and I were to script it. And it was laid bare and so honest. And you can see his face and his lips moving. And that's really what we're all about, which is sort of cinema verite. Caught on tape, self-evident, incontrovertible. You can't deny it. It's there for you. And then we confronted him. And it was like Chris Hansen, To Catch a Predator, where he says, is this seat taken? That's sort of what I do. Chris Hansen famously used to catch the predators and then sit down and they're in shock. And this guy goes to the 5 stages of grief in 2 minutes. If you haven't seen
it's
this.
Intense. It's intense.
Yeah.
That was just as important to watch somehow as what you caught him saying, right? Was like the reaction.
And that's what people want to see because it's a form of accountability. They can't rely upon Congress to hold anybody accountable. They can't rely upon the courts to hold anybody accountable. Justice is often targeted at people in an unfair and un-American way. So this idea of like exposure, this idea of him smashing the device, which he took my iPad. I'm looking for a prop here. I had the videos on the iPad, and he grabbed the iPad out of my hands and started smashing it as if the only location of the video was on this particular machine. And he's on the floor holding onto the ankles of like the cameraman. I mean, it was riveting. It was, and most of the times, whether it's 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace used to do this like 40 years ago before I was born, or I'm trying to think, Catch a Predator, which did it maybe 10, 15 years ago. These things don't usually happen. Like they're running away, they're assaulting you. You don't really see this stuff on network news. I think people want to see this sort of thing on network news. But yeah, man, it looked like a sitcom. It didn't look real. And it was very scary for my team and me. The reason why it was scary for me is not what people would think. I wasn't worried about violence. I was worried that they were going to destroy the SD chip capturing all of this. I was worried that it was going to be a he said, she said, and they were going to say that I assaulted him. And that was always my fear in that moment. So I was thinking, I got to get out of here with that SD chip intact because it's not being uploaded to a cloud. And these are the sorts of terrifying things that you go through, living on the frontier of guerrilla journalism.
Wow. You mentioned like Mike Wallace in 60 Minutes, but they could never do that or would never do that. I mean, and you talk about this, like no one does investigative journalism anymore. And like when people saw you confront him in that bar, restaurant, whatever it was, it's like, I was thinking to myself, I've never seen anything like this. And
yeah.
Why is that, James? Like, why is nobody doing the stuff you're doing? I mean, obviously it takes some balls, but it takes more than that. Why is no one doing this?
It's a great and profound question, and I don't want to sound self-aggrandizing, but like and analyzing my team, it's you have to be ethical, you have to be indefatigable, you have to be resilient, you have to be resourceful, you have to be industrious, you have to be creative. I mean, if I put all those qualities into a machine of 300 million people, what would be the output? Yeah. Now, can you teach hunger? Probably not. So you have to come to the table with the indefatigability that you cannot fatigue. And you're also on the frontier. In other words, you're operating without a safety net. When you're in a restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, and you got a guy assaulting your cameraman, there's no one there to save you. And you're going after the most powerful people in the world. In the world. These are not shrinking violets. So why would you do this if it's not for the right reason? If it's for the wrong reason, you're going to fail. If it's to be famous or something, good luck to you. You have to be a masochist. So you have to be motivated by a desire to go for the jugular, but not be bloodthirsty. Like you have to. So you got to find the right people. That's the first thing. And I mean, when I go back to that moment and many other moments like it in my life, where it's felt like I've been operating kind of without a safety net. I'm a spacewalking astronaut untethered without an umbilical cord, not knowing if I'm going to land on my feet. So I'm like, are they going to, the NYPD is on its way, by the way. Sirens are blaring. We know how that goes. New Orleans 2010, I'm arrested, falsely accused. My evidence was destroyed. And the media just parrots whatever the government tells them. And it's terrifying to operate like that. But sometimes you have to take the leap of faith and you got to go do it. And you might fail, you might be jailed, you might be defamed, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. And you try to find people who also operate that way. The problem being is if you got public recognition, people latch on to me because they too want to be famous. Well, good luck with that. It's not why you should sign up, but people do that. They They want to be involved because they want all the fruits of whatever you be influencer or get clicks. But that's not why you do it. You do it because it's the right thing to do.
Wow, that's intense, really intense. And I don't think people realize the downside of a situation like that. I mean, you've had problems before where you got put on probation for going into that federal building, and all these little details of the law then come bite you. And like you said, the police show up, you don't know what's going to happen. Not only can you not get your story, but this could be flipped completely around to where you're arrested. And even if you're not, if the media gets it one way, might not even matter what the truth is.
It's such an important moment that we got out of that restaurant and we're on a cobblestone street in Dumbo, which is under the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. And there's nobody. It's like a scene out of American Psycho. It's just empty, dark alleyways. I'm trying to hail a yellow cab, but there's no yellow cabs. The Ubers aren't showing up. It's whatever time, 11 o'clock at night, and the sirens are wailing, and I got my SD chip, and I'm trying to find a car. Jordan Walker's blocking the car. The guy, I don't know if you remember, the guy stood in front of the SUV so they couldn't move. So we're running for 15 minutes with a big gimbal camera, my undercover journalist. We are on the final frontier. I'm on the phone with my attorney. Hey, there's the cops are coming. I got to get out of here. He's like, get back up to Westchester County. I mean, these are terrifying things. And I remember one guy recently in my life said, very nice man, very good guy, very talented. He said, tears in his eyes. He said, James, I just can't take it anymore. He said, I just can't take it anymore. I don't want to be at war. I can't do this anymore. There have been many anecdotes like that in my life. Good people, solid people, God-fearing people, moral people. They say, to hell with this. To hell with this war. I can't do this. Some of them have families, some of them don't. So there comes the Churchill line about never giving up and about being resilient and about keep going, which is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, amen to that. I'm so glad you kind of showed a little bit of what it is behind the scenes. And yeah, when I watched that interview, I was thinking, who's the guy on the other side of that camera? Because, I mean, I've gone to film things in crazy locations where we have one take, but that's a tiny percentage of what you're doing there. And it's all down to that one guy, and he can screw it up. He can lose his faith. He can softball it, right? And not get him to say. There's so many problems that can happen there. So you get out of there that night. What happened afterwards? And was it bigger or smaller than you thought it was going to happen on the back of it?
We got back to headquarters in Mamaroneck about maybe 11:30, and everyone came back to the production room. There's actually a video that exists of us watching this encounter, and it was like the Super Bowl. People were jumping up and down in the production room, crying tears of joy that we had pulled off this insane, riveting, truth is stranger than fiction sort of episode. I was hugging my colleague. There was 15 of us clustered into this edit bay back at headquarters. And I said to my editor producer, I said, God, I don't envy you having to produce this, but there was so much adrenaline and there was so much cohesion on the team. This is January 26th. There was so much adrenaline and cohesion that I think they produced the piece overnight and it was ready tomorrow morning. And I remember thinking as an editor, gee, it would take me 7 days to do that justice, but there was just, we were flowing. And that was the pinnacle. That was the apex of everything that I had built, or we had built over the course of 14 years. And then a few days later, I was ousted from the company.
Man, that's really intense, James. I mean, it's going to make a great movie one day. You know that, right?
That's what people tell me. We'll see.
The last thing you want to hear when you're in the middle of it. I think Malone had told me that maybe he saw it and then he called up Tucker or something, and then obviously then it blew up, and it was bigger than you thought it was, or did you think the mainstream media might actually cover it, or because they didn't?
It was big because Elon Musk had let me back on Twitter just a few weeks prior. So I was banned on Twitter for 2 years.
Wow. So without that, it might have been much smaller.
It happened.
Wow.
Yeah, without Twitter, I mean, Elon is changing the world in his own way. And Twitter is the main distribution mechanism for what I've done over the years, particularly recently. So without Twitter for 2 years, I mean, it was like the dark ages. We had to put stuff on Telegram and get people to distribute by proxy, download the clip on Telegram, upload it into their Twitter. So it was a lot more difficult. 80% of our distribution comes from Twitter. So we were let back on Twitter. And then I interviewed Dr. Malone for the piece itself. So there's a section of Dr. Malone saying, I think his quote was, "The gentleman seems to have no introspection whatsoever." So we put that in the piece. And then Friday night, Pfizer responded. Yep.
Wow. Is that done? Is there more to do with Pfizer going forward, or I guess maybe you couldn't say.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, Debbie came out in on stage with me in March. Very inspirational. She said that she was targeted. They had vans parked outside of her home. She was worried for her life. We did a fundraiser for her. It's ongoing. I think the number of people that have reached out to me since is huge. And the thing about investigative work is that it takes a while. I mean, I was tempted to release something just yesterday, and I held it because I wanted to get more evidence, more corroboration. It's always a question of, well, when do you publish? And I think that broadly speaking, at OMG, I want to publish sooner rather than later. But it's always that balance of, well, if I publish this, it's going to burn my ability to get more and more and more and more, because I want 5-part expose, not just to drop in the bucket, knowing that our enemies are going to cover their tracks and say it's isolated and dismiss this guy or that gal. So you need like a lot of evidence and a lot of pressure to create a campaign for reform.
Right. And I think I remember in that Acorn case that you did a long time ago, I think I remember you saying one of the smartest things you did was to drop pieces regularly after you did it. And so the media wouldn't just dismiss it as a one-off. You kind of held back, so you had lots of content, and that way it made it convincing, and you got like some major reform on that.
An isolated, and they'll say it's an this is 2009. They said it was an isolated incident. Now, why would they say that? They don't know what I have in the queue, but they're bending over backwards to try to rationalize or minimize the fraud, which is deeply ironic given their whole purpose is to tell stories and tell the truth. But I think people are waking up to this in a way that I've never seen in the recent year or two, and most people get it. The institutional media is dying. Chris Litch is out at CNN today. I think that he was probably trying to bring CNN back to where it was in 1991, but there are efforts to reject that. But I think that people are hungry and desperate for this sort of journalism, and I have a very big responsibility to do it ethically, and it's very expensive. I mean, what advice? Vice Media went bankrupt, and they had a thing in Times Square in New York City that said, "We go there." That's what they said. This is about 10 years ago. We go there. Imagine how broken the media must be when your unique value proposition is you actually go onto the location you're reporting on. Like people just don't do this anymore. And so it's very expensive. It's a big responsibility to do it the right way. And I think the sky's the limit. I think that we're going to be more successful than we ever have been.
So tell me some plans right now for O'Keefe Media Group. I know pinned on your Twitter is you've been doing some interesting investigations on John Fetterman. I know you doing some stuff with ActBlue and Fox News. I guess Twitter is your medium, and you contest that the mainstream media is never going to be involved with this. But they actually see you almost as a threat, right? They see you as like, we don't even want to support what he's doing, and they just want to read their teleprompters.
It's a very interesting question that requires some speculation. I actually did a story. We did a story a year ago that another girl that works for me now, young woman who recorded a principal in Connecticut who was saying that they don't hire Catholics. And I can remember this one. She said, "We don't hire Catholics. We discriminate." I mean, this is against the law. He was fired from Greenwich schools in Connecticut. Jeremy Boring was his name, Cobb, Connecticut. And we did this story, and this local anchor in Greenwich, I'm trying to remember the name of the local News 12, New Jersey, News 12, Connecticut, News 12, came up to me and interrogated me in front of the school. And this is the guy on tape, Jeremy Boring, who's talking about discriminating against people due to their religion. The governor of Connecticut came out against what he said. These are all Democrats. The U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal was praising my work. That's interesting. And this anchor was assailing me. And there was a little crowd that formed around this. There's a little crowd that formed around the school. And what everyone said to me afterwards is, James, this guy, he wants to be you. He's upset that he's not you, but he secretly wishes he was doing what you're doing. Again, not a psychologist. That's Dr. Malone's field of expertise, but I think that says a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right. Which is weird. And so then they ignore it, and then they subconsciously want to discredit it, even though if they got a tenth of the scoop, they would be putting it on the front page and they would feel great, right?
Yeah, it's a psychological. Again, this is not my area of. It's almost like you need a subject. You have to ask a subject matter expert about this, because this is not my area of expertise. But it's wicked. It's vindictive. There was one journalist named Laura Jadid who wrote a piece for Rolling Stone about this, and she's actually she's a left winger, but she's an honest liberal, and I have a lot in common with her. In the same vein as perhaps RFK Jr., who I interviewed last week. And Laura said, James, you hold a mirror up to people and they don't like what it is that they see. They don't like the reflection that they see in themselves. With what you did, like, for example, Connecticut, that News 12 reporter, just lashing out at you because he's stuck in this horrible position that he's in where he's not able to do what you do. And he makes a good wage, but his conscience eats at him, seeing that you guys are doing what you're doing, and he cannot do that, either because of the position that he's in his corporation, or because he lacks the will or the skill set, or all of the above. So there's this wicked, vindictive attack against you to stop you, because your very existence is a threat to his psychological well-being. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it actually makes total sense. I think there's a lot of that going on these days. Talk to me about RFK. He's the first episode of your podcast, which people can watch on your website. We got links below, but if you could tell it to us now, that would be great. Just thoughts on RFK. We actually had him on the show in April 2020 to talk about vaccinations, and he's actually the guy that convinced me to stay far away from them. And so it's been also fascinating to see him gain traction in the presidential race. And quite frankly, James, I've never seen a candidate like him that speaks so truthfully and honestly in a way that my subconscious is like, wow, this sounds very different than anybody else. Yeah, just your thoughts and your website too.
Yes. I mean, for those of you watching, O'KeefeMediaGroup.com, subscription-based, this is my first podcast. You can watch it, the full one, an hour long behind the paywall. I asked RFK, I try to ask questions people don't ask. I try to tell stories people don't tell, and undercover work can only get you so much. So I'm going to be doing a series every other week, mostly investigative podcasts, sort of documentaries about subject. But RFK, I asked him, are you afraid of these people hurting you? And he said to me, there are some things worse than death, which I think is very rare for a public official or a government official or politician to say. I think I admire that. I admire where he comes from. I admire what he's been through. And I think there's a lot of overlaps between him and me, or him and Trump, or, we don't all agree on public policy, but I admire how brave he is. It's against his own interest to do what he has done in his family and in his political party. So he is a man of great courage, and it's very rare to see that. So I admire that in him. And I asked him questions about, like, when he worked on the Hudson River, cleaning up pollution. I asked him questions about his experience at Fox News with Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch, censoring him, the advertising pressures. And he told me, that you could watch the full podcast, o'keefemediagroup.com. You can log in there and $20. He said, when you go after Pfizer, you're really going after the Department of Defense and how these organizations are linked. At first glance, it sounds crazy. But doing what I do and getting raided by the FBI, and the world isn't what it seems. And we pledge allegiance to the flag. We believe in these principles of this country. We'd like to believe, in these principles. But you go through these and you realize the forces you're up against. So we talked about that, and he's a fascinating man.
Yeah, he really is. He really is. I've been deeply impressed by him, but he was so blocked out from the media, and the anti-vaxxer and all that was so hard against him in the last 2 years that they literally kind of silenced his narrative. But now that he's running for president, I feel like more and more people are actually listening to him and realizing that, wow, there's a lot here. He did a Twitter Spaces with Elon the other night, and I could just feel people hanging on his word, and I could feel, maybe I'm wrong, but I could feel everybody thinking, God damn, this guy is really well versed and really understands the intricacies of government over the past 40 or 50 years as like a historian, even to a certain extent.
Yeah, I asked him, is it worse today than J. Edgar Hoover? He said it's more insidious today at the FBI. I think he's probably right. But I think there's like a Streisand effect happening where the more you get attacked, the bigger they, I know it's a cliche, right? But it's happening like exponentially. So even with what I've been through, like the more you get attacked or even ousted from your own company, it actually is probably, people trust me even more now. I mean, it's kind of on brand, isn't it? You do a story on Pfizer and then you're thrown out of your company. It's like, it's really horrible timing that they chose to do it that way. Really stupid timing. If it's not a sign of compromise, then it's certainly a bad, horrible decision to do that, because it suggests something. And I think with RFK, he's blowing up because, and people on the sidelines, is he going to, people like are watching, they're observing from the fence. I call them fence sitters. Even with me, like, is O'Keefe going to be okay? And then when you see that O'Keefe is okay, I'm going to wade my toe into the pool now. I think most spectators agree with what he's saying and want him to succeed, but they're afraid to say so or do so. They're waiting to see how it all shakes out. And what's happening in society is the more these people are attacked and targeted and censored, the more they're helped, trusted, respected by the Vox Populi, as Elon Musk says.
Yeah, I think you might be right there. You just mentioned Musk, and you mentioned him a couple times. What do you think about Elon, what he's doing with Twitter, and then the future of Twitter as well?
Well, we saw Tucker's show yesterday and all the views it's getting, view counts that are many times over what you're getting on CNN, and CNN struggling. They just got rid of their CEO, and they're very politically narrative driven. And I think the beauty of Twitter and Instagram and the image, I call it the image. I wrote a book called American Muckraker. There's a whole chapter just about the image itself, the philosophy of image, is that when you see something unfiltered, when you see a visual video that's not pre-scripted, that's not watered down with advertising coercion and editorial masters, when you just see a camera aimed in any direction, it's usually going to be more honest and unfiltered. And I think Twitter's medium, if Elon says is true, that they're not going to censor people, that's a game changer. That could change the world. We'll see. I mean, we shall see whether that promise is lived up to. Yeah,
if it does, it's a big move. It's interesting, like you said, when you really learn where all the cooperations were. And like, just as a quick aside, I had been broadcasting for 9 years from this studio, having conversations with all sorts of different types of people. And then on April 6th of 2020, we had the second largest YouTube live stream in the world, 65,000 people watching it. The biggest one that night was Trump's coronavirus briefing. And 30 minutes later, YouTube deleted and banned my video. And I'm telling you, James, I thought it was the weirdos that got censored. until it happens to you. And then you go down this dark, hole, and I start to learn what it's like to be at the tip of the spear, and how strangely a technology company like YouTube cares what I say, or if someone says something about a mask or a PCR test, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and then...
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real. And he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy. I'm looking for partners, collaborators, colleagues who want to join forces with me around the globe and create real value, generational wealth, and financial freedom for everyone else around the world. Get involved in the cryptocurrency markets, get involved in the NFT markets. This is your moment. Life all comes down to a few moments. Don't let this pass. Now it's not too late. Next year's going to be too late. Ultimately, this is about freedom. That's the way I see it. This is about giving power back to the people and enabling billions of people worldwide to use the financial markets to improve their lives and those of their friends and their families and their communities. Honestly, I think it's a violation of human rights not to allow people basic access to financial services. Because right now people are being kept in the dark, they're being robbed of education, and it's a travesty. And so I'm looking for people that want to join me and be a part of this solution. And that all happens inside the DeFi Academy. The gains my students are making are absolutely amazing. Double, triple digit gains in the first month alone. That's amazing. This will change your life. Now is the time to get involved. I'm going to tell you exactly how my students in my academy made money in the last 30 days. I'm talking about real trading results. And let me just whet your appetite a little bit. Let me hit you with some numbers. I'm talking Brendan from New Zealand is up 68.77% on the month. Steve from Europe up 83%. Albert in Singapore up 169.9% on one single trade. I got Susan up 153% on her call options alone, also rocking 139% returns and 442% returns as well on individual trades. These are people that are changing their financial future in the last 30 days, but it's based on trading discipline. I've graduated over 500 students from inside my academy from over 54 countries around the world. It's amazing. When it comes to crypto, DeFi, and blockchain, we love this space. We truly believe it's the future. This is down to our core. It's authentic to what we're doing, and everybody can tell through the camera because you can't make this stuff up. If you're watching me now, wherever you are, I implore you, take 60 seconds right now and join my academy. Apply today. Now you've got a chance. Life all comes down to a few moments. What are you going to do? What's the choice that you're going to make?